course, was brought in October 2001, so very much a reaction to 9/11.
It certainly was, and it was brought in very much as the largest overhaul of the US national security architecture since 1947, right after the Second World War had ended and just at the beginning of the Cold War. So it was very much a bureaucratic response to a crisis.
And very wide-reaching powers as well, you know, free collection of phone and email data, free search of premises, free access to business records, indefinite detentions, and that was extended as well, wasn't it, by Obama in 2011?
Absolutely, and it's important to remember that for all the criticism of this legislation, it had bipartisan support. It was written in such a way that made it very, very difficult to vote against it. Even George W. Bush, when he left office, said, you know what, the wording of that, the USA Patriot Act, it was designed to provoke a response so that nobody could possibly vote against something like that. And he said that was a mistake, but it's had bipartisan support, even though many people believe it contravenes the Constitution, the very premises of American political life.
Yeah, as you say, it seemed set in stone, more or less, until June 2013. Edward Snowden. Explain to us a bit more about this man, to remind people who...
Absolutely. So Edward Snowden was a contractor working for the National Security Agency, which is an organisation which gets involved in electronic gathering of information, looking at emails, telecommunications, for example, and he revealed through a series of leaks what it was that the NSA was doing, the extent of the gathering. There's a lot of speculation about quite what it does. A lot of people are very confused when you say things like metadata, for example. And Rand Paul, who I'm sure we're going to mention in a few minutes, talks an awful lot about that and makes a lot about it. But we need to distinguish
this is all the kind of things which Edward Snowden actually revealed to us, from phone numbers, location data, a huge raft of data there. But as you say, Rand Paul, interesting what's happened today, because this is a man who's managed to actually curtail some of these powers.
Very much. So the idea was this bill was going to lapse. Rand Paul has basically come in and his critics would say grandstanded. He's led a series of filibusters, for example, to make sure that the vote that was meant to happen couldn't. The Senate Majority Leader, his boss, the Republican leader of the Senate, has been embarrassed as a result of this. Now, he's calling this a victory. It's only going to lapse for 48 hours. So there's no doubt that the American government is going to keep doing what it's always been doing. Rand Paul, a libertarian, he's running for the presidency. He's using this very much as a platform to get as much domestic light upon him as possible at this time.
And that seems to have worked in some ways, as you say. It's got the backstop of some of his party and blocked some of those powers at the same time. But as you mentioned there, this could be short-lived, because we expect to see the Freedom Act being introduced later, but to what extent does that replace those provisions?
This is kind of like a halfway house. It just about manages to appease the Obama administration and the Republican-controlled Congress. It's a watered-down version to some extent. What it does is it passes the ownership of the material away from the federal government to the telecommunications companies. They're not happy about this, because they're suddenly being put in a bind about whether they're going to release material to the government. Of course, there's a whole question about what the government can and can't do under things like the Fourth Amendment, for example, the need to show probable cause. What you're going to have happen, it looks like at this point, is a reversion to a pre-9/11 scenario, whereby if the American government wants to get access to individuals' materials, they're going to have to get an individual court order, probably for everybody they want to go after. At this point, of course, since 9/11, there's been a blanket agreement to kind of let that happen. Now we're going to go back potentially to a sort of a Clinton-esque era, if you will, a pre-9/11 era.
And first rowing back in decades of this sort. Great to talk to you. Thank you.